working in Canada. At one point, our Fusion business unit was moved to a temporary office space downtown Vancouver on its landmark Price Waterhouse building. EA Worldwide was based on the 20th floor, and it was posh. Spanning from the 20th floor down to the 17th floor, where Fusion was a hollowed, cut-out vertical glass cylinder encasing its eye of a storm, growing from the 17th floor all the way up to the 20th floor, and inside was a living tree. That's right, EA had a huge living tree growing inside its office buildings on the 17th floor, and it grew all the way up to the 20th floor where EA Worldwide executives worked. We had joked that it must be the tree of life for EA, the tree of EA life. As an aside, EA also had a division called EA Black Box, or EAX, that reported into EA Canada, but operated largely like its own business, just like Fusion did. EAX was housed in the same Price Waterhouse downtown EA facilities. EAX's founder and producer, for Need for Speed, had a deal just like Warren Wall had, where he was allowed to run EAX as he saw fit, provided that he continued to succeed delivering on his product and being profitable and otherwise delivering on key performance indicators, KPIs. Well, EAX worked on other games too, like James Bond, as well as, like I said, Need for Speed. They had a raft of other little games. None of them really stood out to me. It sounds cliche and ridiculous, and maybe it was by choice, but I walked to work when Fusion was based in the Vancouver downtown offices shared by EA Worldwide and EAX. It was uphill all the way to work for months on end, with temperatures sometimes at or below freezing. And when it rained, it either pelted me with hail or snow, and it left me drenched with thawed ice as the morning unfolded at work. Of course, heading home was easier, being all downhill. I shall count my blessings. Alban, I mentioned earlier, Alban Wood. He was worried about moving to Canada from Switzerland because his wife was pregnant at the time, and they feared too much upheaval too late in her pregnancy might introduce complications. Alban was a worrywart extreme. He suffered extraordinary anxiety. He would break out in hives as any scheduled deadline approached. Anything he was unsure of, he would start breaking out. Alban was a perfectionist. He was driven almost obsessively to do great work and be the greatest engineer that he or anyone he hoped could ever be, all the time. Alban did not give himself time to rest or recuperate. He did not give himself time to stop and breathe. He would run and run and run until the job was done, or he collapsed. I remember that Alban would walk laps around the company building to unwind and find a zone that he could return to with less stress and hope to focus once more on his work. Alban and I forged a deep personal friendship and a bond. We would march into hell, like I said, for each other. Of course, because we both would only ask each other to enter hell for a heavenly cause. So we knew no one would ask for something unfair or unwise. Alban joined Fusion while his pregnant wife remained in Switzerland. They coordinated carefully over 6 months her eventual arrival to Canada to join him. There were a lot of details and worries for them to overcome, and thankfully they did so without incident. Alban would have a baby girl with his wife while at Electronic Arts, and then a second daughter, and then a third daughter. He was a great story for overcoming anxiety and rising within EA through sheer willpower and a drive for self-learning and sacrifice for success. Alban took an EA opportunity to return to Switzerland later on for several years, a tour of duty. where he would spearhead technology turnarounds for an EA Global studio that was based there. And from there, he was handsomely compensated, such that he was able to return then to Canada and buy a $1 million house. Congratulations goes to Albin. Although I have many more tales of Albin, I have perhaps key adventures with him. We were allies and friends, and I deeply trusted and respected Albin. There are few people in the world that I can say that I never once questioned their commitment or their loyalty to me. Albin is one of those extremely rare people that I know I have always been able to and will always be able to trust. When Fusion was based in downtown Vancouver, we were on the 17th floor. On the 19th floor was an open terrace that was rarely used because it was so high up and had only a 4-foot tall wall with a handrail. It scared people. The building rocked at that height, just a little bit, but it was enough to feel vertigo and wonder if the world was moving, or if you were moving, or if your perceptions were waning. But you could look out over the Burrard Inlet and see far to Stanley Park and the Lions Gate Bridge and all the way to the North Shore across the waters. You could see the huge multi-peaked white tent of the Vancouver Convention Center. You could watch cruise ships come in and leave in the port. You could see the seaplanes flying and taking off and landing. And there were walks and paths for bikes and people along the shoreways for miles. The terrace became a place of refuge for Albin and I to retreat and philosophize on where we were and where we were headed. We would muse about game design principles and engineering ideas and solutions. We were each other's think tanks, and EA and Fusion benefited from the synergy that formed between us. I will always consider Albin a true friend and someone I can trust. That is extremely rare. Fusion eventually left EA's Vancouver downtown workspace and moved to Burnaby, a neighboring city. At first, Fusion was on 2 floors in a temporary swing space while EA finished building its huge new Phase 2 second 5-story building, which would include motion capture studios and a huge underground gym. EA's Phase 2 new building was adjacent to EAC's main campus original building. They were connected via a ground floor and a skywalk corridor. Everything was glass, shiny, bright, metal. Everything was posh and made to feel as fancy and incredibly special and important as they could possibly do in a very impressive facility. To make moving offices fun, we assigned space captains with supporting space cadets to plan and execute the moves along with their teammates. I continued the space captain and space cadet moving fun from Electronic Arts on to Microsoft and onward forward. As an aside, later on when I was working on HoloLens at Microsoft, my team and I were moved to a windowless underground lab where we worked in a secret underground development augmented reality hardware tech called the HoloLens. It was all about developing covertly, deep underground. When Microsoft announced the HoloLens to the world, they declared that beneath the announcement building was a secret research and development lab where the magic was all made. Well, that team and that magic, that was us. So why do I say we moved down there into a dungeon? Well, like I said, there were no windows. It was not just the underground windowless chambers that we were in, but every single door was forced closed with hydraulics and required special badges in order to exit or enter. Every exit was updated daily with tracking, although later we were allowed to enter via the upper building and descend locked away stairs. We were at first directed to use only a freight elevator in the back of the building through another covert entrance. It looked like we were just going through deliveries. We were to wait until no one was near or watching, though, and then go up and swipe our badge, and then enter a horizontal vertical opening massive gated elevator door. Enter, it would close, then descend. Dirty, loud, clanging sounds. It would go into the deep levels of the abyss, and then it would unload everyone to a pile of garbage bins. We'll talk more about all that later. So back to EA Fusion. As I commuted to EA Fusion each day when it was in Burnaby, traffic was bad. Although I only had to drive about 8 miles, it took 45 minutes. Round trip, that was an hour and a half daily. My time was precious, and I did not want to waste time commuting if I could avoid it. And so I tried all sorts of different paths to go to work. I found the best path was so much faster. I could get to work in 15 minutes on a good day. So much faster. I discovered Hastings. Well, Hastings, it's the underbelly street that cuts near Burrard Inlet and a train station. It was a dive of an area where police left people to abuse drugs and do whatever they wanted with virtually no intervention. Only the most violent of crimes could attract police to enter that area. One morning, heading into work, I observed a throng of bums and addicts assault a car with someone inside. They were unsure what to do. The bums attacked after the car had bumped apparently into a homeless person that was dashing across the street on a bicycle. Another homeless woman dashed to the fallen bicyclist, and she screamed, and every bum and addict from all directions swarmed as if to attack like zombie hordes, kicking and shaking the offending car, banging and smashing on its windows. The car's driver was left with very few options. Drive over the people, wait for the throng in hopes they would give up, or maybe worse, they break inside and drag them out and who knows what to them, sob and plead for them to leave, scream and call for help. Maybe they had a cell phone. Practically speaking, the driver had very few good options. I watched from behind the assaulted car in my silver convertible Mercedes SLK. Yes, I stood out like a sore thumb driving through Hastings' underbelly. The driver was paralyzed, presumably out of fear. A siren blared, and a squad car pulled up on the sidewalk, bypassing the line of stuck cars. The officer blared through its car megaphone, "Stand clear, stand clear, stand clear of the car. Move immediately, move from the car." The mob dispersed, and an ambulance arrived shortly to assess the bicyclist for injuries. I was waved on with the rest of the traffic, finally. Hastings Street was usually a fast shortcut to work, even if it was through the Valley of Darkness. Every morning and night. Yes, I would often work until 8 to 10 p.m. most nights, but I still enjoyed the Hastings Street evening show, and slightly faster drive even then. Once, an addict exclaimed at me, "You rich mother effer American, get the heck out of here!" It was weird. How and why did he think I was American? The car I purchased was in fact in Canada purchased. It was a Canadian car. It had Canadian license plates. Oh well. Some things I will never know. How a bum could know that I was an American is a mystery. But I was the Mercedes in the hood, and that was noticeable. The Hastings Street drive to work was often filled with colorful skits or creative activities by its residents and patrons. There were 3 recurring characters that I remember seeing on Hastings Street. There was Big Baggy, a man that reliably leaned on a wall every morning, day and night with a big bag of something. And when people walked up to him, he would pull smaller bags out of his big bag and hand them to his clients. It appeared that he was selling drugs of some kind, though I cannot confirm that that is what he was doing or what he was selling. But regardless of what he was distributing, he distributed something in smaller bags from his big bag, and so we labeled him Big Baggy. And then there was Cray-She, like crazy but a female, Cray-She. It was a woman that appeared to be a regular streetwalker, drug-addled prostitute. She was not particularly attractive, but her continued presence suggested that she must have a recurring sufficient clientele to fund her life. And then there was Little Baggy. There appeared to be another man selling dope, but he had a much smaller bag, and so I jokingly referred to him as Little Baggy. And finally, there were the heroin dancers. There were many heroin dancers. British Columbia had installed a legal heroin injection clinic on Hastings Street, which could potentially explain the high prevalence of drug addicts and crime in its surrounding areas. Of course, British Columbia chose Hastings Street because it was also already down and out crime-ridden. It was common to see people wiggle dance as they walked down the street. I learned that heroin can put people in a state where they kind of wiggle and move their limbs like noodles with poor motor control. Sometimes their reality is so whacked that I have even seen them dance with street poles and signs. One man was having sex with a building corner in his wiggle dance. The heroin dancers were surprisingly able to stay off the road, but once in a while, someone danced their way in front of you, and you just had to wait for them to meander dance to the other side of the street, or meander drift back to where they came from. Honking your horn was usually a bad idea. The locals were not necessarily friendly, and they were often outright hostile and jealous and envious and resentful, especially for people in Mercedes like me. Despite all that, I endured the horror show to improve my quality of life by saving time. Catherine and I were going on a trip, and Albin Wood needed a car. We thought, why not let him borrow our car while house-sitting and caring for our cat Sunico? The plan was perfect, except for one unexpected thing. A building gate security arm lowered and smashed the roof racks of our Honda Passport SUV 4x4. When we returned and Albin explained what had happened, we could see little, if any, damage to the car, and so decided to simply ignore the incident. Albin felt terrible about it, but I could not see how it was his fault. The arm came down way too fast and hit the car. Albin said he swiped his badge on the card reader, but assumed it must not have triggered the gate, so when the person in front of him drove through and Albin followed the gate, well, it didn't have, I guess, registration, and so it closed on him. But there was no way to know why the arm did close on Albin or whether his badge did or did not work. All he knew is he drove behind someone and it hit my car, the arm. Well, so what? Turns out I received a letter in the mail from the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, ICBC, which is the government-run auto insurance corporation. By the way, there is only the government-run insurance corporation in British Columbia. It's a crown corporation. It is illegal to have any other auto insurance company in British Columbia. So continuing. The letter from the ICBC said that I was guilty of a hit and run at the building's address, and I was ordered to remit payment for damages to the plaintiff. What? How could Albin or my car be responsible for a gate hitting my car? Well, Albin explained the arm broke off when it hit my roof racks. He had carried it up into the office building and left it in the back of the conference room. Apparently, facilities had found it and tossed it into the garbage. The evidence was gone. It was months to fight ICBC over the issue. They insisted that buildings can be victims of motor vehicles striking them too. That's right. Cars can drive into buildings and it's the car's fault. They said it was always whatever party is moving that is guilty. The moving party is always guilty. And cars move, and buildings do not move. Therefore, if a car hits a building, it is the car's fault. That's it. But I challenged the supposition profusely. I declared that was untrue. The building has a security arm, which moves, and thus a moving thing struck my car. Was it therefore not guilty? The ICBC assessor was surprised at how simple and valid my argument seemed. She agreed to go and investigate the crime scene, to see what she could uncover or determine herself now that there were potentially 2 moving parties involved in the incident. Fast forward to the conclusion. The ICBC assessor woman determined there was a sign that warned the drivers to wait until the gate closed before using their badge to open the door and enter through the gate themselves. It was simple. 1 swipe, 1 gate open, 1 entry, 1 closed, repeat. However, the warning sign was occluded by a big yellow bar that had been suspended to indicate a vehicle was too tall to enter the building. In other words, their safety feature blocked the safety warning. Alban and no one could have seen that sign, and so the ICBC assessor decreed the building was operating negligently as a moving party, and so was guilty of hitting my car. She asked if I would like to pursue damages from the building owner now that they would be guilty, not me. That was really quite stupid. Anyway, I told her that I had no interest in anything further, and I thanked her for helping us close out the silliness of the building declaring that my car did damage to it. Maybe a year after Alban had the run-in with the building security gate arm in my SUV, I had a similar thing happen to me. Sort of. I was waiting to go through a security gate in the EA Phase 2 building back entrance. There was a worker's truck in front of me asking security through their intercom microphone speaker to let him in, ostensibly to do some work. Behind me were 2 other cars waiting, and more collecting as time ticked onward. The utility truck's reverse lights suddenly came on, and he just started backing up with no regard to the train of cars behind him. I did not want him to hit the front of my car, so I reversed. But crunch! The damage, I hit the car behind me. It might have been $500 of damage, but the victim behind me was determined to report it to ICBC, since it was the right and proper thing to do. It turned out that ICBC has another hard rule. Any moving party that is going backward is guilty of a collision they are involved in, regardless if a party behind you is moving forward. Yep, once again, I was victim of a moving party violation. And so, my avoiding the utility truck from colliding into me resulted in my having a knock-on ding that was 100% my fault and responsibility to pay. And the service truck was responsible for nothing. There was nothing to do but to embrace different countries, different laws. I learned they are inconsistent. Laws in other countries are simply different, and there is nothing you can do about them. I also learned that you are a victim of laws, whether they are just or not, within and outside the USA.